Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Both chambers of Congress pass a budget resolution with Biden's $2 trillion relief plan. Now Democrats can push through the massive pandemic relief without the support of Republicans. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is kicked off her committees. She says she's freed after admitting her mistakes, and she's calling on the media to do the same. The entire U.S. military is ordered to stand down while military leaders address extremism in their ranks. But a former military officer likens the move to communist regime tactics. The Yankee Stadium turns into a mass vaccination site with plans to vaccinate up to 15,000 people in the first week. And millions of counterfeit masks and tens of thousands of subpar test kits arrived in the U.S. last year. Over half of them came from communist China, but customs officials seized many of them. Shortly after the Senate passed the amended budget resolution, which includes Biden's nearly $2 trillion pandemic relief plan, the House approved it as well. This allows Democrats to pass Biden's American Rescue Plan without Republican support. NTD's Christina Kim takes a closer look at what this means for Americans.
Both votes in the House and Senate were passed completely along party lines. Republican members voiced their concerns, saying they want a package that is targeted to those who need the money instead of a blanket stimulus. Democrats disagree, saying the large price tag is necessary.
Well, the size of the package was determined not for shock value, but to address the dual crises that we're facing.
Thomas Schatz is the president of a private, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization seeking to eliminate government waste and mismanagement. He says the package is too much money and has wasteful elements, but this is Washington's go-to answer.
Members of Congress like solving problems by spending money. That doesn't mean the problems get solved.
President Biden calls the package big and bold. He says his plan will create more jobs, more growth, and makes the U.S. more competitive.
It's better economics. It not only addresses the immediate crisis we're in, it's better for the long-term economic health of our nation and our competitiveness.
While this is a response to a national emergency, this money still gets added to the almost $28 trillion national debt. And Schatz says the giant relief bill will catch up to Americans as it needs to be paid somehow.
At some point, Congress is going to raise taxes. President Biden talked about a $4 trillion tax increase, but eventually this will all catch up to the taxpayers and future generations, and it will have a negative impact on growth, including putting too much money into the economy, increasing inflation, and causing other side effects.
Many are saying Congress should spend the money sitting in the Treasury from the previous bills first, like Senator Kevin Cramer, who says Democrats are trying to rush the massive package before spending money from earlier relief bills.
They are aware that $350 billion is going to state and local governments, yet almost half of the states have not spent half of the money they got from the original CARES Act in March of 2020.
Schatz notes in 2009, then Vice President Biden led the near $800 billion stimulus plan, which is about half the current stimulus plan. Ultimately, it didn't see its desired effect, with some hailing it a disaster. But Biden says the problem with the earlier plan was that it was too small.
It wasn't enough. It wasn't quite big enough.
Echoing his attitude towards the current plan. Schatz notes this is only the beginning of the spending process. For example, the 2022 fiscal year's budget will be set in October. He says this is the time for Americans to urge their representatives to be more fiscally responsible. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene says she's fine with the House kicking her off her committee posts. She says now she'll spend more time building support for America First policies. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more.
Greene says she's grateful to have had the opportunity to admit her wrongs on a world stage.
So going forward, I've been freed. I feel freed.
Greene once accused Speaker Nancy Pelosi of treason, which carries a dark punishment, and has gotten criticism for expressing interest in the QAnon conspiracy theory, which she says is in her past. That's why the Democrat-led House has now stripped her of her committee assignments. The Congresswoman apologized for saying things that were, quote, wrong and offensive, but called on the media to consider righting their wrongs, too.
You owe the people an apology. You lied about President Trump. You owe the people an apology. I've done mine yesterday. Do you want your legacy to be the platform that destroyed our nation and caused our people to hate one another? Or would you rather be a platform that told the truth because you're given the great gift, the freedom of press, so you can tell the truth?
Greene says she's deeply concerned about the state of the country and the policies being pushed in the White House and Congress. Republican leadership in the House strongly opposed her removal, but 11 Republicans still voted against Greene. She called it a big betrayal and said it could cost them the majority in 2022.
I hope that my Republican colleagues really think about what they've done. I'm sure they're going to hear from their voters at home because the base is loyal to President Trump, and the base has been very loyal to me, and they've shown me that.
That's why Greene says she's glad to have more time now to hold her party accountable and, in her words, push them to the right. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The Defense Secretary is ordering the entire U.S. military to stand down. This in order for military leaders to address extremism in their ranks. NTD's Grace Coulter speaks with a lieutenant who says this move is the kind of thing that happens under communist regimes.
Newly appointed Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on Wednesday ordered a stand-down by all military units in the next 60 days to give commanders time to address extremism in their ranks. This comes after it was found that a number of military members and veterans attended the January 6th protest, with some breaking into the Capitol building. He said military leaders should be trained to make sure they're in touch with the people they're leading, including knowing what they're doing and what they're reading.
And if confirmed, I will fight hard to stamp out sexual assault and to rid our ranks of racists and extremists.
And now it appears he's putting that pledge into action. But Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, a retired U.S. Navy and police officer who also served on the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, questions the move.
This, to me, dangerous. It looks like a political litmus test, and it's a road that you would only find in communist China or in the former Soviet Union.
He says he wonders how military leaders will vet extremist views without violating service members' constitutional rights.
We all know that in communist China and the former Soviet Union, there were political officers attached to every unit. You just breathe something that is anti-government or criticize the Kremlin or criticize the Chinese Communist Party. You're finished. You're done.
What counts as extreme is often subjective, making it difficult to identify. Even Chief Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said on Wednesday, quote, "We don't know how we're going to be able to get after this in a meaningful, productive, tangible way." Lieutenant Rogers says he's concerned about what sort of views are going to be classed as extreme, noting that recently conservatives and Trump supporters have been the targets of censorship and discrimination. Just last week, Austin ordered the removal of a number of Trump administration appointees from the Pentagon advisory boards.
Are military members who have conservative views and values, are they the ones that are going to be targeted?
Lieutenant Rogers says he thinks the move is going to have a tremendous negative impact on the morale of the military. He says it will cause mistrust, suspicion, and fear among military members. He says if things continue to go down this road, the U.S. military that has always respected the American people and the Constitution will cease to exist.
And they will become another arm of the government. And I'm not talking about the U.S. government as we know it now, but a U.S. government that Joe Biden, the socialists, the communists want to create in this country.
The chief Pentagon spokesman said there is not yet any decision on how long the military pause will be. He said training materials will be developed and sent out to units so they can have discussions about the issue. Reporting by Grace Coulter, NTD News.
New reports are bringing to light just how much it's costing to keep the National Guard troops in D.C. until March. The roughly 5,000 troops are there at the request of Capitol Police. The Hill says a defense official confirmed the amount would be nearly $5 million to keep the troops there, though Bloomberg first reported that estimate. There hasn't been a breakdown of the cost. The acting Army Secretary of the Guard says they're concerned some lawful protests could either be used by malicious actors or other problems could emerge. But some, including Republican lawmakers, have scrutinized the lingering military presence, saying there seems to be no specific credible threat to justify the move. An election software firm, Smartmatic, is suing Fox News, attorney Sidney Powell, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and others. The company accuses them of spreading disinformation about its software following the general election.
Smartmatic is demanding at least $2.7 billion in damages. It says there's a disinformation campaign against it. The firm alleges the defendants made false claims about the company's role in the election and its connection with Venezuela. Details that the lawsuit says benefited the defendants, who gained more viewers or readers, raised money, or curried, quote, favors with the outgoing administration. Fox News and Powell have already disputed the lawsuit's claims. In an email to NTD's sister media, The Epoch Times, a Fox spokesperson describes the lawsuit as meritless. In December, the broadcaster decided to air several segments challenging and exploring the claims made in its previous reports, after Smartmatic alleged the reports contained false and defamatory statements and threatened litigation. Smartmatic filed its complaint in a New York State court in Manhattan.
The president of France blasted Facebook and Twitter for silencing former President Trump. He says democratic governance online is one of the critical challenges of our time.
We were very upset as well.
French President Emmanuel Macron says he does not want to live in a democracy where key decisions are decided by private social media networks.
And this new regulation, this new governance in a certain way, has to be democratic and discussed between our leaders.
Speaking with the Atlantic Council think tank, Macron says more and more of people's lives are taking place online, and that space needs democratic regulation and governance. He weighed in on the Capitol riots and the response by social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. Macron said these platforms had helped President Trump to be so efficient in making himself heard, then cut him off.
At the very second when they were sure it was over of the power, suddenly cut the mic.
Twitter permanently shut down Trump's account, which had 89 million followers. Facebook also bans the former president indefinitely, and rival social media platforms favored by Trump supporters were also shut down.
Killed all the platforms where it was possible for himself and his supporters to express himself.
Macron said social media companies should not be making judgments about whether Trump's speech was appropriate or whether Trump should lose his ability to speak publicly thereafter. Macron says these decisions should be made by laws or regulations that are democratically discussed and approved by democratically elected leaders.
The Yankees are partnering up with their state to open their stadium once again for New Yorkers, but not to watch a game, to get them vaccinated. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more from the Bronx.
So we're in front of the Yankee Stadium, and it's been turned into a mass vaccination site here in the Bronx. And they chose the Bronx, they say, because this is the borough in New York City with the highest positivity rate. So this means that eligible Bronx residents will be able to come here and get vaccinated. We saw a really long line when we first got here, but that's basically been cut down to nothing. I really don't see anybody in line anymore. Now, who is eligible? Well, we're talking about the elderly. We're also talking about medical workers and law enforcement will be able to come here to get vaccinated. Now, they are looking to vaccinate up to 15,000 people, and Mayor Bill de Blasio confirmed that 13,000 appointments had already been booked.
This is such an important day. The Yankees stepping up to save the lives of Bronxites, to save the lives of New Yorkers. That for one day only, I will declare myself a Yankee fan.
De Blasio is usually a Boston Red Sox fan. To try to encourage people to get vaccinated, the mayor invited Yankees legend Mariano Rivera to speak.
You know, I play here. I grew up as a baseball player here at Yankee Stadium and see so many fans that love the game and supporting me and supporting the organization, the New York Yankees. But now it's time to support you and let you know that it's okay to be vaccinated. I'm online, okay? When my turn comes, I'm online to get it.
We asked two newly vaccinated Bronxites if they were nervous about getting their COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah, I was very nervous.
Why were you nervous?
Well, you know, we've all been anticipating this for so long. I just didn't know what to expect.
No, because I consider it mentally that it's the flu shot. And since I don't get no side effect with the flu shot, then that's my sign that I'm not going to get no side effect.
Now, I do want to clarify that it's 15,000 appointments they were looking to book in the first week, and they've already booked 13,000 according to the mayor. So the other thing is that the governor says that they've already used up 95% of the lot of vaccines that the federal government gave them, the first lot. So that's over 1,475,000 doses that they've used. As for positivity rates and hospitalization rates in New York State, they have gone down so much that the governor has said that he will open, or allow, I should say, indoor dining in New York City on Valentine's Day. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
If you violate the federal transportation face mask requirement, you may have to pay a fine. The TSA says the first offense is $250. That can grow up to $1,500 for repeated violations. These penalties could be in addition to others imposed by operators like U.S. airlines. Some have banned passengers who don't follow the rules. The Federal Aviation Administration also says it will crack down on anyone who disrupts a flight over wearing a mask. The federal mask requirement took effect earlier this week. It requires face coverings on trains, airplanes, and buses, as well as their hubs. U.S. Customs officials seized more than 12 million counterfeit face masks and test kits over the last financial year. Over half of them came from China. Customs and Border Protection says these fake supplies threaten the health and safety of Americans. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the details.
From October 2019 to September 2020, U.S. Customs officials seized 12.7 million counterfeit masks and over 170,000 CCP virus test kits that don't meet FDA standards. And they seized over 38,000 FDA-prohibited chloroquine tablets. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, about 51% of these substandard products originated in China. What's more, last December, customs officials in Cincinnati seized over 10,000 counterfeit surgical masks in a shipment coming from China. The boxes the face coverings came in were fraudulently labeled as made in the USA. If they were for real, these fake 3M masks would have a price tag of over $65,000. And over the last fiscal year, customs officials had their hands full intercepting imports made with forced labor. The report says officials issued a record 13 orders prohibiting these imports. China is again where most of these things came from, including disposable gloves, seafood, and cotton. In China's Xinjiang region, the Chinese regime has detained over 1 million Uyghurs, Kazakh, and Kyrgyz people in internment camps. There, detainees are subject to forced labor, torture, and political indoctrination. The CBP in January banned all cotton, textiles, and tomato products imported from China's Xinjiang region. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Customs and Border Protection says agents arrested a group of 11 Iranians who illegally entered the U.S. Agents saw the group on the bridge in the Yuma sector of Arizona. According to a news release from the agency, agents saw the group near San Luis, Arizona, on a bridge. Border Patrol agents then determined the group had illegally crossed the international border into the U.S. The group of 5 females and 6 males was arrested and taken to Yuma Station for processing. They were all from Iran. The agency says Yuma sector agents regularly encounter people from all over the world, and that Yuma sector agents have led the nation in catching illegal border crossers from Iran. The arrests come as Biden faces 2 lawsuits from Texas and Arizona over the administration's moratoriums and deportations. And coming up, San Francisco is suing its own school board and district for restarting for in-person learning. The city's mayor is also supporting the lawsuit. And Americans across the nation are getting ready for Super Bowl Sunday. Fans are rooting for either the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Kansas City Chiefs. More on that after the break.
Trends may be fleeting, but values are timeless. We now bring you this new clothing brand with classic design and luxurious comfort. It's our way of sharing hope and inspiration from the world of Shenyun. We bring you Shenyun Dancer. Wear it with honor.
someone has to find the way to build the Great Dome. Completely new, completely original.
San Francisco is suing its own school board and district for not reopening in-person classrooms. NTD's Eileen Ang has more.
On Wednesday, San Francisco filed a lawsuit against the city's Board of Education and the Unified School District to reopen classrooms. City Attorney Dennis Herrera alleged that the school board and district does not have a plan for in-person learning. He is not convinced by the statistics and their proclamations claiming that schools can't be reopened safely. None of the city's 54,000-plus public school students have had in-person instruction for over 300 days, but private institutions have reopened.
113 private and parochial schools in San Francisco have reopened and remain open. Almost 16,000 students have returned to in-person school, and less than 5 cases of in-school transmission have been reported.
Today, the San Francisco Unified School District unions announced the city can resume in-person instruction when it moves to the red tier of the state's blueprint for reducing COVID-19. According to Herrera, the school board should prioritize reopening schools rather than renaming empty schools. Officials defended themselves, saying a previous meeting was entirely about the reopening issue. Last week, the school board decided to invest $1 million to rename 44 empty schools to names they think have no connection to slavery, oppression, or racism. One parent is glad something is happening to push for in-person instruction.
I feel like they don't have their priorities in the same place that many parents do and many students as well.
She has 2 kids attending school in the city and said that a few other parents are happy that something is being done.
I think that the benefits of getting the kids back to school does outweigh the potential risks as long as they follow certain rules and are careful.
City Mayor London Breed also supports the lawsuit to reopen.
We've helped inspect schools and classrooms to get them ready. We work with the district to set up the testing necessary to monitor the virus when our educators and students do return. We've given $15 million to support our schools above what we already do through our normal budget process.
San Francisco is among 4 counties in the Bay Area that are allowed to reopen their classrooms starting this week. The other 3 are Santa Clara, San Mateo, and Marin counties. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
A Federal Trade Commission ruling says Amazon withheld payments from certain delivery drivers. The agency found that the shopping giant used customer tips to act as employee wages. NTD's Emerald Chang has more.
The FTC ruled against Amazon on Tuesday on claims that the company withheld tips from certain drivers. Amazon will pay close to $62 million to flex delivery drivers. The FTC said that Amazon had told customers it would give tips to the drivers. Instead, it withheld the money during the more than 2-year period. Flex drivers are independent contractors with Amazon who use personal vehicles for deliveries of the company's Prime Now and Amazon Fresh items. Customers could tip the drivers on the checkout page. Evidence shows Amazon offered drivers hourly rates of $18 to $25 per hour plus tips. However, according to the FTC, Amazon lowered the rates and covered driver income with customer tips. Amazon stopped accepting customer tips in 2019 when it caught wind of the FTC investigation. The $61.7 million represent the full amount that Amazon allegedly withheld and will be used to compensate drivers. Amazon has agreed to pay the FTC's charge, although it still doesn't admit any wrongdoing. Emerald Chang, NTD News, Seattle.
The Super Bowl is this Sunday, and the host city is getting ready for the historic game between Tampa Bay and Kansas City.
This year will be the first time an NFL team plays the Super Bowl in their home stadium. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers will face off against the defending champions, the Kansas City Chiefs.
It's definitely exciting to be one of the teams playing, but even more so having the whole NFL Super Bowl experience in town, being the home team for the first time ever. So it's definitely a different feel from years past.
Fans of both teams are checking out the stadium ahead of the game.
We're real excited to be here, all the way from Kansas. We won our tickets to come to the Super Bowl from Kansas City Chiefs. because we're season ticket holders and just excited to be here.
Due to the CCP virus pandemic, the game will have limited in-person attendance. But fans are still looking forward to watching the game at home or with family and friends.
I'll be celebrating at home just with my small little family, but I know a lot of people are taking advantage of the beautiful weather here, and there's a lot of outdoor viewing parties, different parks where people are setting up screens to watch outside and be able to social distance outside.
Oh, very, very. It's been nonstop traffic, people going down and taking pictures of the stadium every day. And it looks, helicopters and the flybys have been practicing. It's been exciting around West Tampa.
The game will start at around 6:30 p.m. on Sunday, February 7th.
We all know what Super Bowl Sunday means: food, football, and of course, Super Bowl ads. But this year will be a little different than usual.
Some big brands, including Budweiser, Kia, and Coca-Cola, have opted out of airing Super Bowl ads this year. But that's opened it up to a bunch of newcomers.
You have brands like Fiverr, which is an online freelance marketplace, Scott's Miracle Grow, which of course with lawn care and gardening during the pandemic gaining in relevance, they decided to buy in this year. You even have diapers advertising in the Super Bowl for the first time with Huggies. So there are a lot of first timers that are getting in.
She expects the overall tone of the ads will also be more lighthearted after the year we've all had.
That it's really the goal during the Super Bowl to entertain, uplift, and to bring in some optimism. So I think we're really going to see a lot more lighthearted and humorous ads this year.
A 30-second commercial spot cost $5.5 million on CBS during Sunday's game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs.
This year in particular, you have fewer Super Bowl parties. People aren't out at bars where maybe the TVs are on silent. So I think this year you actually see more people really engaging with the ads and spending time watching the ads more so than in the past.
Super Bowl ad veteran Anheuser-Busch says this year it will use the funds it would normally spend on ad time to invest in awareness and education about the CCP virus vaccine. Super Bowl 55 will take place in Tampa, with The Weeknd performing at the halftime show sponsored by Pepsi, who has also decided not to run an ad this year.
Tandoori chicken.
Some milk from the store
And let me guess, cookies? Wow, me hungry. Yeah. Here, I'll call some friends to help us eat. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Get more from your neighborhood. DoorDash.
The Chiefs and the Buccaneers will be cheered on during their game by some of the country's most worthy fans. Let's take a look at who received a special invitation from the NFL.
Sherry Shepard and Keisha Helmuth are pumped for Super Bowl Sunday. The two frontline Florida nurses will be among the 7,500 healthcare workers from around the country who received invitations to the annual NFL championship game.
We're excited to represent our home team, our hometown nurses. It's a historical Super Bowl, and we worked through a historical pandemic. So this, really means a lot to us to be there and represent, all the frontliners, and we're very excited for it.
Last month, the NFL announced it would give away nearly a third of the seats at the reduced capacity championship event in Tampa to healthcare workers. The league requires that attendees are vaccinated against the virus. Most healthcare workers attending the game will come from Florida, while some will travel at the invitation of the regional NFL teams.
It did boost morale. I think there was just such an excitement around the unit. Not every person is going to go, but for the most part, everyone is so excited for those who get to go.
Back in December, a little more than 60% of Americans said they'd be interested in getting the vaccine in a Reuters poll. Health experts say the vaccines approved for emergency use in the U.S. are safe and effective.
If you're like me, and I think it's actually most of us, then you're getting really fed up with the nonsense going on inside the banking system. I mean, we've worked hard our entire lives to retire comfortably. We just recovered from the crash of 2008, and it seems like it's about to happen all over again. Look at the too-big-to-fail banks. They're only getting bigger as the Fed hands them trillions of dollars daily, while simple folks like you and me, we're only getting the short end of the stick. That's why I'm glad I found this book called The Bank Failure Survival Guide. Give us a call, and we'll send you a free copy with no obligations whatsoever. Just one American to another, telling you about some options that you might not have considered. Call 866-239-2619 today for your free copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide. That's 866-239-2619.
A tragedy strikes one neighborhood in China when a resident attempted to leave his neighborhood during lockdown, but a local community guard tried to stop him. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
A pandemic control volunteer in northeastern China was stabbed to death on Wednesday. He was attempting to block a resident from leaving his neighborhood. The volunteer worked as a neighborhood guard in the Hulan district of Harbin City, part of Heilongjiang province. The northeastern province is one of the heaviest hit regions in China's latest CCP virus resurgence. According to local police, he was stabbed multiple times after refusing to let a resident leave the neighborhood under lockdown rules. In Harbin, many neighborhoods are currently under strict lockdown orders. The Canla neighborhood, where the volunteer was attacked, is among the most restrictive. It's been under lockdown for over 2 weeks and is considered a high-risk area for infection. Residents are required to stay inside their homes at all times. They're not even permitted to go outside for daily exercise. NTD's sister media, the Epoch Times, was able to reach several residents in the community for more details. One of them explained the man who attacked the volunteer wanted to go out to buy medicine, but was blocked at the community entrance. The man added that taking a brief walk through a courtyard shouldn't be a problem, as long as people are able to maintain a safe distance. The stabbing incident quickly became the most searched topic on Weibo, a Twitter-like social media platform. Many Chinese netizens left comments condemning the attack, but some also said they could understand the factors leading up to it. One of them writing, quote, "Local authorities are so strict on lockdown, and some volunteers are rude and have no sympathy," adding that they believe there will be more similar incidents. A rocket built by Chinese aerospace company iSpace reportedly failed shortly after liftoff this week. The Hyperbola 1 rocket lifted off from Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in northwest China. Photos posted online show the rocket left an unusual exhaust trail in the sky. Chinese media didn't detail the reason behind the launch failure. It was China's third rocket launch attempt this year. The first two were successful. Last year, at least 4 attempts failed, while one was delayed because of technical problems. Suspicions are rising that a U.S. technology ban hit China's space exploration industry hard. The policy blocks microchips made by or with U.S. technology from being exported to China. The high-end chip shortage could be causing trouble for China's space aspirations. Beijing hasn't commented on the assumption, but before the ban, launch failures were a rarity in the country.
$400 billion in foreign exchange reserves are missing from the Chinese regime's official data. Why don't the numbers add up? NTD's Penny Zhou has more.
The Chinese regime is touting China's record trade surplus last year. That's despite the CCP virus pandemic's toll on global trade.
面对疫情变化和外部环境存在诸多不确定性，我国成为全球唯一实现货物贸易正增长的主要经济体。
The trade surplus means China exported more goods than it imported. This is supposed to give a massive $500 billion jump for the nation's foreign exchange reserves. But that didn't happen. Data from China's central bank shows foreign exchange reserves rose by only a little over $100 billion. This has raised discussions online. Where did the $400 billion go? China has the world's largest foreign exchange reserve, but it's still critical for Beijing to maintain a certain number in the reserves. That's because the country depends on the reserves to import essential goods, including grains, petrol, and semiconductor chips. The Chinese regime has a tight control over foreign exchanges. Exporters usually sell the foreign currencies they earned to China's commercial banks. Commercial banks then sell most of the money to the central bank. Foreign exchanges in the central bank, together with the small amount kept by commercial banks, make up China's foreign exchange reserves. Chinese columnists have suggested some possible reasons why the numbers don't add up. This might be because some custom goods surplus is not yet remitted back to China, and some of the money may be soaked by commercial banks for overseas investments. But still, a huge amount is missing. According to China's balance of payments data, in the first 3 quarters of 2020, over $100 billion of the country's income were counted as errors and omissions. China's economic numbers are notoriously inaccurate. Even the regime itself has openly admitted to falsifying statistics. But it usually blames the mistakes on local authorities. A U.S. think tank previously estimated the Chinese regime overstated its GDP by about 2 percentage points every year. And a recent New York Federal Reserve report shows that China's official data are often unbelievably smooth over time compared to authentic data. Experts argue that when Western media and analysts cite the official data, the inaccuracies will have wide implications for investors and companies doing business in China. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Coming up, Samsung is considering Austin, Texas for a new multi-billion-dollar microchip plant. The deal could create around 1,800 jobs. And Google tries to make nice with Australia by launching a news site with paid content. That and more coming up on NTD.
마루 유치원 폐쇄 명령서입니다.
전 폐쇄 명령 받아들일 수 없습니다.
유치원 폐쇄 명령이라.
좀 들어간 건 어떻게 됐어? 도저히 방법이 없대?
정일도 사장님을 대신해서 제가 대신 말씀드리면 안 되겠습니까?
The U.S. Court of International Trade upholds former President Trump's national security tariffs on steel imports. This denies a steel importer's challenge to the duties. The New York-based federal court found that Commerce Department and Trump properly applied a Cold War-era trade law. In 2018, Trump put 25% tariffs on imported steel and 10% on imported aluminum from most countries. The intent was to protect national security and maintain healthy domestic production. He invoked a 1962 law that allows the president to restrict imports of goods critical to national security. New Jersey-based steel importer Universal Steel Products tried to get the court to cancel the tariffs and argued they were not legally put in place. Maybe Samsung can help. It's considering Austin, Texas for a new multi-billion-dollar chip plant. It says it'll create local jobs, but it wants tax breaks from the local government. Julian Satterthwaite reports.
Samsung Electronics is eyeing Austin, Texas as the possible site for a new $17 billion chip plant. That is according to documents filed with Texas state officials. The South Korean giant says the deal could create around 1,800 jobs, but it may hang on what kind of incentives are on offer. Samsung is seeking combined tax abatements of more than $800 million over 20 years from Austin and Travis County. If the Texas site is selected, Samsung says it will break ground in the second quarter and have the plant operational by late 2023. The firm says it's also looking at alternative sites in Arizona and New York states, as well as at home in South Korea. It's potentially a big win for US chip making. While Intel does make some semiconductors there, most of the contract manufacturers that make chips for other companies, including Samsung, are based in Asia. Last year, Samsung rival TSMC disclosed plans for a $12 billion chip plant in Arizona, due to come online in 2024.
Google has launched a news site in Australia featuring content it has paid for. It's trying to persuade Australian officials to drop a proposed law that would force it to pay. Julian Satterthwaite has the details.
Google has launched a new platform in Australia offering news it has paid for. The search giant has struck its own deals with publishers. It's paying 7 outlets, including the Canberra Times, to use their content. The move is a bid to show that Australia's proposed new laws forcing it to pay for content are unnecessary. Draft rules on the subject are currently before a parliamentary inquiry. Google is lobbying ministers to drop the whole idea, calling the proposed law unworkable. It's threatened to pull out of Australia if they go ahead. Now, financial terms for the new platform have not been disclosed. Last month, Reuters said its content would be among that featured on the news showcase.
A House subcommittee releases a report on toxic baby foods that could cause brain damage. The group is calling for new standards and testing requirements. The panel examined products made by several baby food manufacturers and said they have often sold foods with high levels of heavy metals. The report says Walmart, the Campbell Soup Company, and Sprout Organic Foods refused to cooperate with the investigation, although the companies deny this. The report urges regulators to set maximum levels of these toxic substances permitted in baby foods and requires manufacturers to test finished products. Euromonitor estimates that the U.S. baby food market was worth $8 billion in 2020. And up next, we hear from 2 victims reportedly forced to give false confessions in China. They say they're relieved after the UK revoked the license of state-controlled broadcaster CGTN. And some Uyghur Muslims in Turkey fear they're being deported to China in exchange for CCP virus vaccines. That and more after the break.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals, especially vitamins A, D, E, calcium, and iron. With natural processing and no harmful chemical additives, it has more than 90% concentration of omegas 3, 6, 7, and 9. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritang omega-3 does not smell of fish and contains no pollutants, so both adults and children can safely and easily consume it over a long period of time. Puritang green vegetable omega-3. Eat 2 a day and you'll feel brand new!
Two victims of forced confessions in China say they're relieved after a UK regulator revoked a broadcast license for a CCP-controlled broadcaster. NTD's Earl Rhodes has more.
Peter Humphrey celebrates the ruling by regulator Ofcom to ban Chinese state-owned broadcaster CGTN.
Seeing the license revoked today is a moment of triumph, not only for me, but also for all the other victims of this type of abuse, including many Chinese people.
CGTN broadcast a forced confession with Humphrey that was filmed during his 2-year imprisonment in China. Humphrey says that he was drugged, tied to a chair and put in a cage when a police officer interrogated him, adding that CGTN, which broadcasts in English, completely misrepresented the situation in its report. Humphrey says his son, who was 18 at the time, was traumatized by what he saw.
They want to influence the global narrative about China and what's happening in China and so forth through the twists that they put on their coverage. They do it through sheer distortion and lies.
Ofcom argued that since CGTN is fully controlled by the CCP, it cannot broadcast here, since UK broadcasting law doesn't allow political entities to hold licences. CGTN, whose European headquarters are in London, called Ofcom's ruling manipulated by extreme right-wing organisations and anti-China forces.
Ofcom's decision on revoking the licence of CGTN is historically significant. It is clear that the mouthpiece of CCP totalitarian regime will no longer have a foothold in the UK.
Cheng was abducted in 2019 to extract information about the Hong Kong protests. He said he was tortured and forced to confess to have solicited prostitution. Cheng says watching his forced confession on CGTN caused him great distress. Humphrey expects Ofcom to hand out more penalties to CGTN over his and Cheng's complaints. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
In France, restaurant owners challenging mandatory closures risk backlash from the government. NTD's David Vives meets a chef who finds himself under surveillance from intelligence agencies.
Stéphane Turillon is one of 200,000 restaurant owners in France. Like his peers, he had to close his restaurant, La Source Bleue, for around 6 months in 2020. In mid-January, he told us he would be inviting all restaurateurs to reopen in defiance of the mandatory closures.
It's the government that led me to bankruptcy because it makes me ask for more bank loans instead of letting me welcome people in a safe way.
He invited hundreds of people to meet at La Source Bleue on February 1st, but most were blocked by police. Here is what he told us today on the telephone.
1 hour before opening, the head of police in the region ordered police forces to deploy around my restaurants.
Earlier this week, the French Minister for Economy and Finance said restaurant and bar owners face sanctions and suspension of their government aid for reopening. According to Turillon, there's almost no chance that a restaurant owner will challenge the mandatory closure, as they need the government financial help to survive. He also says he's under pressure by the police for his attempt at reopening.
When I opened my restaurant, the Territorial Intelligence Police wanted to talk to me. They also sent special investigation police forces to watch over me this day. A friend of mine told me I was on the S list.
S list means that Turillon poses a threat to the nation. The other people on this list are usually potential terrorists. According to restaurants' unions, 65% of restaurant owners fear they will go bankrupt this year if lockdown measures aren't lifted. David Vives, NTD, Paris.
Uyghurs in Turkey say some in their community are being deported to China in exchange for CCP virus vaccines. The country is largely reliant on a Chinese-developed vaccine, and no doses have been delivered despite China's promises. NTD's Earl Rhodes has the details.
Uyghur Muslims in Turkey say they fear for their future.
It's not just me. Everyone is afraid of being extradited. We live in anxiety. We want our Turkish brothers here to speak out about this.
Opposition lawmakers in Turkey accuse Ankara's leaders of selling out Uyghurs to China in exchange for COVID-19 jabs. China promised tens of millions of vials of vaccine to Turkey. They haven't been delivered yet, and they haven't given any explanation. China has signed a treaty with Turkey, which Beijing wants to use to speed up the return of some refugees and Uyghurs under the name of terrorism.
If the Turkish parliament doesn't sign the extradition treaty with China, we are wondering that China will say that they won't send us the requested vaccines. And as long as the question isn't answered, this concern and suspicion won't soothe the public.
Lawmakers say Turkish police have raided and detained 50 Uyghur Muslims in recent months. It's a sharp uptick from last year. Rising fears are already prompting an influx of Uyghurs moving to Germany, the Netherlands and other European countries. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
After the break, the man who lit up screens as a father of 7 in the blockbuster Sound of Music dies. We take a look back at his career, which spans 7 decades. And French pianist Colette Mays is recording her 6th album. She's been mastering the instrument for over a century. More on that after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and bite-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled, and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Actor Christopher Plummer has just died today. He's best known for his role as Captain George Von Trapp, playing opposite Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music.
He was 91 years old. Plummer was an accomplished Shakespearean actor, honored for his varied stage, television, and film work in a career that spanned 7 decades. He charmed audiences across generations. You might remember him as the voice of the villain in the 2009 movie Up, or the wealthy mystery novelist in 2019's Knives Out. In 2012, at the age of 82, Plummer became the oldest actor to receive an Oscar. He also won 2 Tony Awards, 2 Emmy Awards, and performed for some of the world's top theater companies. He died peacefully at his home in Connecticut with his wife Elaine Taylor by his side.
French cultural venues have been closed for months due to the pandemic, but that didn't deter this 106-year-old French pianist from recording her 6th album. NTD's Eddie Aitken has more.
Mays was born in 1914 and has been playing piano for over a century. She says she began to love the piano because her mother was very strict.
My inspiration was first of all tenderness, which was lacking at home. I found this in the work of Schumann, maybe also in the work of Chopin, but Schumann was even more tender.
Mays lives in a tall building near the Eiffel Tower in Paris. She says she looks to the clouds for inspiration, and her energy to keep playing comes from love of life.
We have to look at life. Without that, we're stuck between 2 doors. We have to look at life incessantly. It's beautiful.
Mays says music is more important for her than any type of food.
That's my food for the spirit and for the heart.
Mays' son sees his mother as an inspiration for others.
Her good mood, her joy, her love of life brings people a smile in worrying times like the one that we're now living through.
Mays started recording albums in 1998, with a first release in 2001. She is now preparing a 3-disc album releasing in April. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.